Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, May 14th, 2014 Planning Board for the Town of Raymond. This evening, all we're doing is a workshop, so we're going to dispense with the formality of opening up a formal meeting. And the board does have a quorum, but I think most of what we do today can be done by consensus. And I don't really see us having to vote on anything. And in which case, if we do, we can always open the meeting. So in that regard, we can skip right down to new business, which is the discussion of the potential ordinance revisions for the next round.
There you go.
So you're up.
Okay. I wrote a memo for you. I think Danielle put it in your packets.
Mm-hmm.
Most of what we're dealing with so far this year that we've identified, and there may be some follow-up next month, and we have a little bit more chance to meet and investigate it. But right now, we've identified a couple of definitions that need to be coordinated among a few of the ordinances. I'll just kind of give you a general overview, and then we can get into each one. Also, there's some text changes and additions in the shoreland zoning allowed use table. That's item number 2. I'm going to have a brief discussion on the shoreland zoning amendments, the changes to Chapter 1000 that the state has out for comment right now, and I'll update you on that. There is one possible change that we can make this year, and I'll go through that as well. And item number 4 is adding some text to request digital copies for mapping and proposals for the planning board. Also, number 5, a text change to the street ordinance. And the last item is probably going to have a follow-up next meeting with Sebago Technics. John Giles will have to address that issue. So we can just start with number 1.
Sounds good.
Okay. So we've identified a couple of definition changes. Most of them are based on some of the work that you did last year. And the first one, I think we covered this a little bit last year in discussion, is that there's no definition in the land use ordinance currently for municipal use. There is municipal officer and municipal official, and those current definitions are the same as what you also have in the shoreland zoning ordinance, which is the state model ordinance. And I've included in here a couple different versions of what's happening in other communities and some examples of municipal use. It's also the concept of coming up with maybe an alternative definition and calling it institutional use. We've also looked at that. I have an example from Yarmouth, from Cape Elizabeth, Gray, and then another one I just picked it from Glenburn, Maine, because it's very brief.
Where are you
for
right now?
municipals.
I know.
It's
Page
item
2.
number 1, and it,
On 2? So I thought it was on 2.
Basically wrong memo, though.
Oh.
It's the one.
Which
That's
memo
why-
are you
that's why I
looking
couldn't
at?
find it. Why do I not have that now? All right, I'll cheat.
No. Came in
Okay.
an envelope later. Didn't come in the initial packet.
Oh, okay.
Municipal.
Yep.
so I didn't get to a point where I actually wrote out a recommended definition, and I can do that if that's how you want to decide. If next step you want me to give you some example text to work on. Right now I've just included a couple different examples, and you'll see in most of the examples they do identify their own municipality. I think the last 2, Gray and Glenburn, are the only 2 that do not do that. And that was something that the attorney advised us to omit.
Mary advised us to
Omit town of Raymond. Don't include that as a specific in
Mhm. I remember she telling us that. I don't really remember why. But
I think she felt that being that specific could bring some legal issues, identifying just the town of Raymond. Plus, there's some regional issues that might become an issue if you only identify the town of Raymond in a municipal use. There are a lot of regional entities that Raymond is involved in that could locate here, and it might affect.
Soil and Water District.
Yeah, and
School
some
board.
other communities have addressed that with specific language. I think that's a similar issue in Yarmouth, and they have very specific language that identifies which regional entities they'll allow and which they won't. It might be something that, we can develop some text and then send it over to Mary and have her review that before it goes into the ordinance.
Yes. What do you guys think?
It's gotta be, we've gotta figure out what to do with it, so,
We gotta do something with it.
yeah.
It's identified in throughout the ordinance, and it's not defined,
Right.
so.
What do you think, legal guy?
I don't think it should be that hard to write a definition. I think
Yeah.
that I could write one for that matter. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a couple examples for next
Okay.
meeting.
I guess with a range of,
I'll try to put together one or two suggestions of my own, and we can.
great, thanks.
Okay, so the next definition is accessory use. We do have definitions for accessory use in land use and shoreland zoning, but they're slightly different. And I've also given you a couple of examples of what other communities are listing for accessory use definitions. The only difference, let me see if I can quickly figure it out. The only difference is in the shoreland zoning ordinance, the state model, it lists, I'll read the whole thing, just to make it easier. A use or structure which is incidental or subordinate to the principal use or structure. And then in shoreland zoning, it adds accessory uses when aggravated shall not subordinate the principal use of the lot, a deck or similar extension of a principal structure, or a garage attached to the principal structure by a roof or a common wall is considered part of the principal structure. And looking at a lot of different ordinances, this is pretty much the cut and dry example of the definition
Good.
for most communities. So I can, next step, I can develop, some
Yes.
language that. Last one is agriculture, and you don't have a definition for agriculture in any of your ordinances. And we have Raymond, but that's actually gray. Pretty sure that's gray.
Yeah, I was a little confused about that.
Sorry.
So we don't have one, but we do have one.
No, you don't. You don't have one.
I didn't see it in there, but
So I pulled a couple. Grays, I think, is the most generic, and then they get a little bit more detailed in Cape Elizabeth and in Wyndham because they have certain industries there that have had other issues in the past, so they've defined it more specifically. And it is identified in one of the things that came up. This came up, I think, is because it's actually in. I think it's in the shorelands. In the shoreland zoning ordinance. And it's mentioned as a conditional use in several of the districts in the land use ordinance. So it should be defined in the land use ordinance.
That price is right.
You know what, I take that back too. That is actually, that's not Gray's definition, that is yours, but it's from the shoreland zoning ordinance. So our thought was to just simply coordinate and have the same definition in the land use ordinance. It's page 54 of the shoreline zoning ordinance.
65 also references the agriculture. I just wondering where that. In land use.
Yeah, it's referenced several times in the land use
Yeah.
ordinance too. Yeah.
But it's not actually. Oh, it's actually on page 66.
66 of the land use ordinance?
Yep.
Yeah.
66 of 141, there's 1, 2, 3 paragraphs on it. Farm, all the way down there at the.
Yep. And several of you, the districts allow it as a use.
So we're just, we're looking.
So I can develop a couple examples of,
of the,
language.
just the definition for okay.
yep.
Yep.
Okay. Number 2 is in the shoreland zoning ordinance, page 13. Number 15, so that's actually page 14.
Of shoreland?
I'm sorry, page 13 of shoreland, yep. The land uses table,
Mm-hmm.
number 15. Again, you've got the word municipal. If we're gonna keep a definition, if we're gonna develop a definition for municipal, it's not an issue. If we decide to go in a different direction with institutional, we might wanna change that to institutional as well. We'd have to go through the ordinance and coordinate anything that says municipal.
So 15E, we would be deleting out municipal and putting in institutional?
If we decided, instead of having the term municipal, if we decided to go with institutional,
Okay.
Depending on what we develop for a
yeah.
definition for
I mean,
municipal.
my recommendation would be to stay with municipal. This is something that came up in my conversation with Chris and Jim, that they had thought about using institutional. I feel as though most ordinance have a definition, and for municipal use, I think it would be a more typical term to use. Number 16 was pretty simple. It's just awkward language. Structure accessory to allowed uses. Allowed accessory, it should be changed to accessory structure. And then there was discussion about adding, there's a definition for accessory apartment, and adding a 16A accessory apartment here as an identified use.
To the actual, we're on page 13, right? To the 16A
Yep.
to the, okay.
Yeah, and I think this is based on some changes that were made during the last warrant that identify that as a particular use. Number 17, now that you've passed a boat launch ordinance, you need to add that into your use table.
Yep.
That's pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
And number 27 is simply to change parking facilities to parking areas, and that's something that was done in the warrant, passed in the warrant, so it coordinates with that. Okay, and I'll develop all that language and put it into a format so you can see the changes for next time. So number 3. Shoreland zoning amendments. I talked to Mike Morse. Basically, they're still, the chapter 1000 amendments are still out for comment. So they're not, it's not time for the municipalities to take a look at making those changes yet. They're not official. However,
You can go to the hearings.
yeah, however, there is one, There is one rule that's actually been adopted already in the last session. And it's the expansion of accessory structures, and there's a new graduated system. I think Jim talked about this last year. And that is expansion of non-conforming structures. So I'm not going to get into the specifics of it because I have a copy of it and I can give it to everybody. But basically, it's within 75 feet. There are certain requirements, and you're allowed to increase only a certain percent under certain requirements. And then as you go back 100 feet, as you go back 500 feet, those requirements are loosened somewhat. So it's not really. It's probably an addition of about 2 pages of language. It's pretty significant.
Well, the shoreline zone isn't 500 feet.
500 feet was the wrong
Well,
amount.
it isn't Raymond.
You're
but
correct.
not
You're
this-
correct. I'm just trying to use it as an
Oh, I
example
see.
that
Yeah.
there is, as you go out, I think there's 3 different, and I could take them.
25,
So
75,
Yeah.
and 100.
Right.
200 or something.
Right. And so, for example, at 100 feet, you can expand up to 1,500 square feet, or 30% of what you had if the building existed in 1989. And then there's also an additional height restriction. So it's a little bit more specific than it was in the previous version. So the town has the option to make these changes now or to wait. Again, it probably won't, the DEP probably won't even meet with towns until sometime in the winter. So it's doubtful that the other changes will be ready for warrant at next year's town meeting. It'll probably be another year. But you can go ahead and make this addition now. And it's one thing that you wouldn't have to deal with next year. And I can draw up that text for you for the next meeting. We can go over it specifically. We're cruising through this. So,
It's good to see.
number 4 is, again, it's a pretty small text change, but I think Danielle would probably see it as an important text change. That you include language that requires digital plans to be submitted, and I assume a proposal, full proposal, right? To the town, so that you can upload that information into your files and possibly your website. And that's just really a language addition, probably to, I think I've identified it. Page 90, your submission requirements. There's a couple different places where we would probably add just a sentence or 2. The last one that we would address would be, this is something that Jim and Chris suggested, notarized road management plans. So making an adjustment to the street ordinance, and this is on page 5 of the street ordinance. It's under 4.2L. And basically, we would be requiring an applicant to document on the approved plans the actual agreement for maintenance of a private street or a backlot driveway. So it requires them to identify that on a plan, so when they file it, there's a record of it, a formal record of it.
We've been making them do that now.
Well, that's what I thought from your language, but I think he wants it to be more clear. It says legal documentation, such as homeowners association documents or proposed deed covenants. The language doesn't specifically state that, so I'm assuming that there's some discussion among the applicants that maybe they're getting some pushback.
I think this
Okay.
came up with your Marsnick and Ross
Yes, it did.
review that came up then, and then Jim also added the addition that it might be something to consider is recording the actual road man, because people come up and they're like, well, what is the agreement? And at the town, we don't track those really, so we're like,
So recording at the registry.
after having them notarized to prove that
And we're
each
not
person
requiring
was
them to be
presented
notarized right
those
now.
Okay.
those agreements. You know what I mean? Because
We
I think
we don't require that.
No, not.
no, I can't remember. Would that come with Ross or was that with
Yes.
Marsnick?
No, I think it was Ross, because at that point in time, there was no point in having a road upkeep agreement, because it was only one family that owned all the property. There was
Right.
no other people that were gonna be building on the
And
road.
he felt that it should be had it notarized and then have it recorded with the deed when you do the transfer. So
Okay, that makes sense.
And then the last one, I'm guessing, John Giles is probably referring to, he wants to use LiDAR, imagery to determine the, boundaries for resource protection. Is that
yes,
correct?
Not here.
So that's not in my world of
Yeah.
expertise. So I think it would require, I think he made it, didn't he make a presentation last year?
yeah. He made a
Um,
presentation. We decided that because of the funding structure of this, in order to keep up with all of our other projects, including tax maps and things like that, this was going to take a couple years because where the state had kind of changed the way that they do resource protection, that he thinks that once we do this LiDAR buy-in, that he'll be able to do more elevation and base level mapping so that we can actually determine what is wet. Because right now the map is showing some areas are wet, but if it's up a huge slope on a hill, how could it be wet if you're talking about an incline like this? So,
But we still go off the land, the actual land survey.
sometimes yes. Yes, so, but sometimes if it's in, just it makes it,
Yeah, right,
yeah, so.
okay. So what's the benefit? The benefit is just,
Having a better map,
map.
better mapping
Yeah.
and
Well, and there could be benefits outside of
Yes.
development review. I mean,
Right.
the town could use it for other,
Right.
to, make decisions on other issues outside of
Mhm.
development review.
It just makes it a lot cleaner of a process, you know what I mean? Because if we show that adequately, because we've had some also issues where people have, the state has reduced some areas, saying that they're not at a high risk, but then there's reports of waterfowl and things like that. So the town needs to recognize whether we're adopting their recommendations or reducing them. And I think at the time when Pat was here, he said that we had to come up with distinct standards, and this is
Mhm.
just a step towards that.
okay.
That's it. That's all we have for this, so far this year.
So Stephanie, one of the things that always comes up, we get lots of our feedback your way from reviewing projects, and we haven't had a lot of projects to review, so we don't have very much stuff, but one of those things that usually always comes up is lighting. And we have an intersection lighting requirement
Okay.
that we sometimes waive and sometimes don't waive, but we have no other lighting requirements, and we've always it's always been a give and take with the developer as to, what type of lighting is gonna be put in and the intensity of that lighting that's gonna be put in. But somehow I think we need to have that language a little tighter.
More specific
Yeah.
standards?
Right. So that, what light can leave the property, what light has to stay within the boundaries of the property.
Okay.
That, and I would like you just to check to make sure, because it is old memory here, that the intersection lighting is waiverable. I think it's a requirement, and I'm pretty sure we've waived it once or twice before up on the, do you guys remember the road? It was the development right up here, the private road, the intersection light. Yes.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
What?
Mawa's Way.
Yes, well,
Mawaga?
Yeah, that we did.
the other road's a
I
different
can't
name.
understand
but
what you
it's
Yeah.
saying.
Mawa.
You spell it?
Mawa, or something like
Ma-
that.
it's
M-A-W-A.
Begins with an M.
Yeah.
M-A-W-A.
It's like less than a mile up the road. Go home that way.
Mawaga.
All right.
When you go to Gray, drive home that way, you'll see on the left-hand side. Then our findings of fact discussion that we had and that forms that we now fill out, or does that need to get incorporated somewhere into the ordinances now? Or is it just,
I didn't think so because it's kind of like a state standard in terms of it, but I
so
don't
we don't
think.
need to reference it, or we
No,
don't need
and
to do
it's-
it?
I've not
Because
seen
we-
it referenced in an ordinance.
Exactly, and I think because it's kind of like a procedural thing, and that has to do with, one state law, and I think we changed the bylaws in order to reflect this change, so.
That was gonna be my question, was if it
Did-
was in the bylaws. If it's in the
The-
bylaws,
yeah.
then it shouldn't need to be
We're
anywhere
fine.
else.
Did we change the bylaws?
I think we were waiting, because the last time we did it was part of a workshop, so,
I don't think
we were waiting for one more meeting that, I think it has to go before the selectmen to be approved as well, so I'll look into that.
okay, because I don't think we've.
Cause I don't think you guys
I'm almost
voted on
positive
it.
we have not changed the bylaws since we talked about the findings of fact.
No, I think you just discussed it, but didn't actually vote on it yet, so, I'll look into that.
Okay. And then Stephanie, I guess as you go through the verbiage on the definitions, I think it would be extremely helpful for us to see, to make sure if we are or we are not actually changing the intent of the ordinance with the definitions, or the impact to the ordinances, what the impact of the ordinance was going to be when we tighten up the definitions, so that we kind of know what's, for example, if we change it, if we go through and change the agricultural definition, I want to make sure that we're not.
Where it's cited in other parts of the ordinance?
Right.
Okay,
And we're not impacting upon,
Yep.
or if we are, it's an impact that we want to impact.
yeah,
Not-
okay.
And we could do that for all those that you've mentioned. Anybody else have anything they want to look at?
Do we need to look at shoreline zoning and parking? Change that ordinance?
We just did.
Didn't you just do that one?
No, we didn't, we changed definition of, we modified parking for standards, but we didn't eliminate it in the shoreline zone.
Correct, we did not eliminate it.
Oh.
You want to talk about eliminating it?
Yeah,
If we do that, we need to change the shoreline zone. Because Raymond Cape, the whole thing is shoreline zone. It's an inappropriate use of it.
well, I'm just saying, I'm not sure we need to change anything, I'm just saying, we said we couldn't do some things this last year,
Right.
but another year we could.
Yep,
So I'm not really sure what that meant, what we, as a group, meant by that.
okay.
But I didn't want to pass that by if we have some other business we need to attend to fix whatever we think needs to be fixed or not. I don't know.
This would certainly be the time to talk
Talk
about
about
that,
it.
I
Yeah,
would think.
that's all. I just didn't want it to go without being on the agenda somewhere. I think some people are expecting we would look at that.
Yeah, I have no, I think we're probably going to be addressing it to a certain extent, which is why I was looking for those definitions of the municipal.
Okay.
Because I think that's going to directly impact in the parking. But,
I think it will, at least in that one particular area, but we may want to just make sure that we address it in the shoreline zone overall too, even if we don't change anything.
right,
When you say address it, can you be more specific what you mean by address it?
Well, some people think that you can't have a municipal parking in the shoreline zone because of the word municipal. It says we can, okay? So maybe it's all fixed in the definition of municipal. An example's always been used about what if Presque Isle wants to do something in Raymond, can they do it under our word municipal? They probably can, or we think they can.
So what if they can?
Well,
And it-
That
Why
was-
is that different than an individual who might want to do the same thing?
Because then the individual would be subject to the land use ordinance differently than a municipality would, depending on how we define municipal. The municipality isn't subject to the same land use restrictions that a private individual is, the way things are currently set out right now. So I think that's the kind of the conflict that we have in the ordinance as it's put right now. At least that was how I interpreted it.
I think you're right.
Well, that was the discussion last year with Mary Costigan,
right,
correct?
Mhm.
right.
So I think definitely addressing municipal will help, but I think also if we, and I'm not sure the procedure going forward, I don't know if there'll be a time for public comment on this or not,
Oh, there will be.
then I think certainly that's something that parking in the shoreline zone should be addressed in general. I think that might be something that people may want to.
As
be
an
heard on.
authorized use?
Yes,
Any parking?
any parking,
Okay.
whether it's municipal or not. I don't know that we'll make any changes, but I think it's something that people might wanna discuss.
Okay,
Well, last time it all changed, discussion ended because of history saying municipal means municipal.
Right.
Means any municipality. And if it meant just the town of Raymond, then it should have, then we might interpret it differently.
right, my concern is a discussion of whether or not we're gonna have parking in the shoreline zoning brings the fact that we have other camps that have parking in the shoreline zoning.
That's not the issue. The issue is a municipality.
Oh, no, I understand, so I'm just wondering if we can approach it through the definition of the municipality.
Oh, I think so. I do.
Oh, okay,
But it was,
Okay.
the side issue was how do you get to it, and that's
right,
fine.
okay, all right, so let's not do so address it now, Stephanie, just will mean that we're gonna address it through the definition of the municipality. And
Okay.
we'll take a look and see, and that's what I was kind of insinuating when I wanted to see what it would do to the other ordinances.
Okay,
So we'll address it there with that definition, and then see what that definition is gonna.
how it affects other parts of the ordinance and
Right,
then make a decision.
and particularly, and I think the one that we're all interested in is the shoreline zoning.
Okay, so still all you need from me is that definition and then where it's identified, how it affects the rest of the
Yeah.
ordinances.
Right,
Okay,
and I guess probably to speed the process along, it would be nice to give us a little bit of a range from the most unrestricted to the most
Yeah.
restrictive, so that we
Okay.
could.
We need a motion to go home.
No, it's not a meeting, we could actually just get a
You
leave.
wanna just leave?
Yeah, we can just leave.